YouTube audiobook preview and review script. Black Notice by Patricia Cornwell. A mysterious body is discovered inside a cargo ship arriving from overseas. What secrets traveled across the ocean with it? Imagine a sealed cargo container. A massive ship. An international port. Thousands of miles of open ocean behind it. And inside, something no one was supposed to find. Not drugs. Not weapons. Not stolen goods. A body. Badly decomposed. Hidden among commercial cargo. Carried across international waters like a secret sealed in steel. And when forensic pathologist Dr. K. Scarpetta is called to the scene, what appears at first to be a disturbing but isolated death begins to unravel into something far more dangerous. Because in Patricia Cornwell's Black Notice, the dead don't simply stay dead. They leave messages. They leave traces. And sometimes, they point toward a threat that is still moving. Today, we're diving into a spoiler-free audiobook preview and review of Black Notice, one of the most atmospheric and unsettling entries in the K. Scarpetta series. We'll talk about the mystery, the forensic realism, the emotional weight behind Scarpetta's investigation, and why this book still grips crime thriller fans years after its release. But be warned. Once this case begins, every clue feels contaminated. Every person has something to hide. And every answer only raises one question. Who, or what, came off that ship? Black Notice is written by Patricia Cornwell, one of the defining authors of modern forensic crime fiction. The novel is part of the long-running K. Scarpetta series and runs 41 chapters across roughly 412 pages. And from the very beginning, Cornwell establishes something important. This is not just a crime novel. This is a novel about death arriving from far away, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. The central case begins at the port of Richmond, Virginia, where a container ship has arrived from overseas. Among ordinary cargo, workers discover a horrifying smell. When the container is investigated, authorities find a badly decomposed body. The situation is disturbing enough on its own. But the details don't add up. How did the body get inside? Was the person alive when the container was sealed? Was this an accident, a murder, a message, or part of something much bigger? And why does the trail immediately seem to reach beyond Virginia, beyond the United States, and into the shadowy world of international crime? That is where Dr. K. Scarpetta enters. She is not simply a detective. She is a forensic pathologist, someone trained to read the dead with scientific precision. Her job is to look at what others cannot bear to look at. To find evidence in decay, trauma, tissue, bone, wounds, fibers, and silence. In Black Notice, Scarpetta is called to a scene that tests every part of her expertise. But here's the twist. She is not entering this investigation as a detached professional at the top of her game. She is grieving. She is exhausted. She is emotionally wounded. And she is trying to keep herself together while the dead are demanding her attention once again. That tension, between Scarpetta the scientist and Scarpetta the human being, is one of the reasons this book stands out. Because in Cornwell's world, forensic work is never clean. It is messy. It is political. It is personal. And sometimes, the case on the table cuts straight into the investigator's own life. For those new to the series, Dr. K. Scarpetta is one of crime fiction's most influential forensic protagonists. Before forensic science became a television obsession, before every crime show had DNA labs, ultraviolet lights, and autopsy room revelations, Cornwell was already building suspense around the careful, methodical world of medical examination. Scarpetta is brilliant, disciplined, and deeply committed to the truth. She works in a world where tiny details matter. A fiber can shift a timeline. An insect pattern can tell a story. A wound can contradict a witness. A body can expose a lie. But what makes Scarpetta compelling is not only her intelligence. It's the burden she carries. She has seen the worst human beings can do to one another. She has spent her career among murder victims, grieving families, political pressure, and the relentless expectation that she will always know what happened. In Black Notice, that burden feels heavier than ever. Scarpetta is still dealing with profound personal loss. The novel opens with emotional intensity, making it clear that her private life is fractured. She is trying to function, trying to work, trying to outrun grief by throwing herself into case after case. And then the call comes. A body at the port. A body from overseas. A body that may be only the beginning. This is one of Cornwell's strongest choices in the novel. She doesn't present Scarpetta as invincible. She presents her as competent, yes, but also vulnerable. Scarpetta can read evidence with extraordinary clarity, but she cannot always read her own pain. And that makes the investigation feel even more dangerous. Because when the case begins to widen, when hidden clues start surfacing, when the possibility of a larger threat becomes impossible to ignore, Scarpetta is not just fighting for justice. She is fighting to remain herself. Narrator. But let's go back to that cargo container. Because this is where Black Notice becomes more than a forensic mystery. This is where the novel asks a chilling question. What if a dead body isn't the end of a crime, but the first warning? Narrator. The discovery at the port is one of the most memorable setups in the Scarpetta series. A sealed container. A decomposed corpse. International shipping routes. Customs questions. Chain of custody problems. Jurisdictional tension. And a crime scene exposed to heat, time, transport, and contamination. For a forensic pathologist, this is a nightmare. Bodies speak through evidence, but decomposition can blur the language. Heat changes tissue. Time destroys clues. Insects, fluids, confined spaces, temperature, humidity, and movement can all distort what the body is trying to reveal. And because this body has traveled by ship, the investigation immediately becomes complicated. Where did the death occur? At sea? Before the container was loaded? During transit? At a previous port? Was the victim placed there deliberately? Did someone use the container as a hiding place? Or was the container itself part of the crime? This is the kind of scenario Cornwell excels at, a crime scene that is physically limited but intellectually enormous. One container becomes a doorway into a global mystery. And Scarpetta knows that the condition of the body is only one part of the puzzle. She also has to consider shipping records, foreign ports, customs procedures, container seals, cargo manifests, dock workers, law enforcement politics, and the possibility that the victim's identity may be buried under layers of bureaucracy. The title Black Notice refers to an international law enforcement alert associated with unidentified bodies. That concept alone expands the scope of the story. This isn't just a local homicide. It may involve foreign authorities, transnational movement, and a victim whose life and death crossed borders. Cornwell uses the international dimension to create a sense of unease. The threat feels mobile. It has traveled. It has crossed oceans. It has entered quietly. And now it is here. That's terrifying because it transforms the port from an industrial workplace into a threshold. A place where things arrive. A place where secrets can be shipped. A place where death can pass through customs before anyone even knows it's there. One of the reasons Patricia Cornwell became such a major name in crime fiction is her attention to forensic detail. In Black Notice, the science doesn't feel decorative. It's not just there to make the story sound technical. It drives the mystery. Cornwell understands that forensic suspense is different from action suspense. It isn't always about car chases or shootouts. Sometimes suspense is waiting for a lab result. Sometimes it's noticing that a wound pattern doesn't match the obvious explanation. Sometimes it's realizing that a tiny inconsistency means someone has been lying from the beginning. And sometimes the most frightening moment is not when the detective enters a dark room, but when the evidence suddenly stops making sense. Cornwell's forensic details create immersion because they make the reader feel the process. You feel the procedural frustration, the paperwork, the contamination risks, the interagency tension, the harsh physical realities of decomposition, the difficult balance between speed and accuracy. Scarpetta cannot simply guess. She cannot rely on instinct alone. She must prove. And proof takes time. That's where Cornwell builds pressure. While Scarpetta is trying to identify the victim and reconstruct events, the reader senses that something larger may be unfolding off the page. Every delay matters. Every missed clue may cost someone. Every official who acts incompetent, territorial, or evasive becomes part of the tension. And because Scarpetta is emotionally strained, the reader constantly wonders. Is she seeing the whole picture? Can she trust the people around her? Can she trust herself? That is what gives Black Notice its psychological edge. The science is precise, but the human world around it is unstable. But this investigation is not happening in a vacuum. Scarpetta's professional world is under pressure. Her personal relationships are strained. And one of the most important people in her life, Captain Pete Marino, is not exactly in a good place either. So when the case begins to turn darker, the question becomes: can this team hold together long enough to understand what they're facing? A major strength of Black Notice is that Cornwell doesn't separate the mystery from the emotional lives of her characters. Scarpetta is grieving. Her niece Lucy is involved in dangerous law enforcement work of her own. Pete Marino, long one of the most recognizable figures in the series, is dealing with professional and personal frustration. Around them are colleagues, investigators, officials, and new faces who may help or complicate everything. The dynamic between Scarpetta and Marino is especially important. Their relationship has always been tense, loyal, abrasive, and deeply human. They frustrate each other. They protect each other. They can be brutally honest and sometimes cruel, but underneath the conflict is a long history of trust. In this novel, that trust feels strained. Marino is angry. Scarpetta is distant. Both are carrying resentment and pain. Neither is communicating well. And that matters because crime investigations depend on trust. When the team is fractured, the case becomes more dangerous. Cornwell uses these emotional complications to deepen the suspense. The reader isn't only asking, who is the victim or who is the killer? We're also asking, will Scarpetta push people away when she needs them most? Will Marino's anger cloud his judgment? Will Lucy's dangerous world collide with Scarpetta's case? And who, among all these professionals, is actually reliable? This is where Black Notice becomes psychologically engaging. The external mystery is compelling, but the internal mystery is just as important. What does grief do to a person who works with death every day? Scarpetta is trained to control the scene, document evidence, and remain objective. But grief is not objective. It doesn't follow procedure. It doesn't respect schedules. It surfaces at the worst possible moment. And when you are already haunted, every new body feels like another door opening into darkness. That emotional vulnerability gives the novel weight. Scarpetta is not simply solving a case. She is trying to survive the act of solving it. The atmosphere of Black Notice is one of its strongest features. This is not a bright, clean procedural where clues line up neatly and justice feels inevitable. This book feels grimy, humid, metallic, and claustrophobic. The port setting is perfect for the story. Ports are places of movement, cargo, people, money, secrets. They are heavily controlled and yet strangely vulnerable. Containers move by the thousands. Paperwork becomes reality. A sealed box can travel from one continent to another with very few people knowing what is truly inside. Cornwell turns that idea into suspense. The setting suggests scale. Scarpetta's investigation may begin with one body, but the world behind it feels huge. Foreign routes. Unknown handlers. Hidden identities. Systems that can be exploited. And then there is the physical horror of the body itself. Cornwell does not use forensic detail only to shock. She uses it to remind us that death is material. It changes. It leaves traces. It affects everyone who comes near it. The smell, the heat, the confined space, the reactions of those at the scene, all of it creates realism. That realism makes the mystery more disturbing. Because this doesn't feel like a puzzle arranged for entertainment. It feels like a case file opened too late. A warning no one understood in time. The atmosphere is also psychological. Scarpetta's grief casts a shadow over the investigation. Even when she is focused, there is a sense that something inside her is unstable. The world feels slightly off balance. And Cornwell keeps layering unease. A body that should not be there. A scene that may have been compromised. Officials who may not know what they're doing. Evidence that leads outward, not inward. And the unsettling sense that the person responsible may be closer, or more dangerous, than anyone expects. And then the clues begin to suggest something worse. Not just death. Not just smuggling. Not just one victim lost in transit. Something deliberate. Something predatory. Something that may have crossed the ocean for a reason. So, spoiler-free, does Black Notice hold up? For fans of forensic crime fiction, absolutely. This is a standout entry because it combines several thriller elements that Cornwell handles extremely well. First, the forensic science is immersive. Readers who enjoy autopsy detail, evidence analysis, investigative procedure, and medical examiner work will find plenty to appreciate. Second, the international angle gives the story a broader scope than a standard local homicide. The idea that a body has arrived through global shipping routes makes the case feel unpredictable and expansive. Third, Scarpetta's emotional state adds depth. This is not just a case of the week. The investigation lands at a moment when Scarpetta is vulnerable, and that vulnerability changes how every scene feels. Fourth, the supporting characters bring conflict. Cornwell understands that investigations are not conducted by perfect teams in perfect harmony. Egos, politics, incompetence, loyalty, and resentment all affect the pursuit of truth. And finally, the pacing has a slow burn dread that pays off in atmosphere. This is the kind of thriller where tension builds through accumulation. Each procedural detail adds pressure. Each question opens another door. Now, readers should know that Cornwell's style is detailed and sometimes methodical. If you prefer non-stop action from page 1, the book may feel more procedural than explosive at times. But if you enjoy forensic realism and psychological unease, that detail is part of the appeal. The audiobook experience can be especially effective because the story has such a strong sense of mood. The port scenes, the investigative conversations, the quiet emotional moments, the sudden discoveries, all of it lends itself well to audio. This is a book best experienced when you can sink into the atmosphere. Late at night. Headphones on. Rain against the window. And a mystery unfolding one disturbing clue at a time. So why does Black Notice remain memorable within the K. Scarpetta series? Because it captures what made Cornwell's early forensic thrillers so influential. It gives readers a professional woman at the center of a dark, male-dominated investigative world. It treats forensic science as dramatic, not because it is flashy, but because it is exact. It understands that the dead are not silent if someone knows how to listen. And it places Scarpetta in a case that feels bigger than the body in front of her. That is the key. The container is only the beginning. The real mystery is what the body represents. A crime? A mistake? A warning? A connection to something international and deeply dangerous? Cornwell keeps the reader moving through that uncertainty, and she does it while forcing Scarpetta to confront personal pain she cannot simply work her way around. That combination, science, grief, danger, and hidden violence, is what makes Black Notice stand out. It's forensic. It's psychological. It's procedural. It's international. And it has that eerie feeling every good thriller needs. The sense that the truth is coming. But it may arrive too late. Black Notice begins with a body sealed inside a cargo container, but what Scarpetta uncovers reaches far beyond one death. It is a story of hidden clues, damaged people, international shadows, and the terrifying possibility that evil can travel quietly across borders before anyone knows it has arrived. If you've read or listened to Black Notice, I want to hear your theories. What did you think of the cargo ship mystery? Did you suspect where the investigation was heading? And where does this rank for you in the K. Scarpetta series? Drop your thoughts in the comments, but please, keep it spoiler-free for new readers. And if you enjoyed this audiobook preview and review, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more mystery, crime, thriller, and forensic fiction recommendations. Because the next case is already waiting. And in the world of K. Scarpetta, the dead always have something left to say.